Well, good morning, everyone. I should say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're at in the world. Welcome to today's webinar entitled Visa Tips, Successfully Navigating the Visa Interview Process. My name is Greg Weimer, and I am the Director of International Students and Scholars here at Colorado State University. And it is good to meet with you all. I'm sure that I think we had about 20 some people registered for this webinar. Right now we have 5 people. One person just joined us. And so I'm sure people will join us as we kind of go along. A few housekeeping items. Feel free to enter questions into the webinar chat. I'll try to keep track of that as I go through. However, towards the end, I will review all questions and answer those, and even give folks an opportunity to unmute if you want to ask the question just using your voice rather than typing. But I'm glad you're here today. We've got a lot to kind of go through, and I've edited this even since last year in regard to some of the changes regarding vetting of social media. So we've got a few additional slides as well. The presentation will take probably about 35 to 40 minutes. And then I think I've got it scheduled for an hour and a half. So there's plenty of time for questions at the end, and happy to spend as much time answering questions for students as I possibly can. So with that, we'll get the show on the road here. And again, welcome and glad you're here attending today. So let me get forward. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is you need to begin the process. So when you're applying you've applied for Colorado State University, you've been admitted. Once you've received your I-20 or DS 2019, if you are a J1 student, you will receive these documents from Colorado State University. Typically, we're sending them to you via email. You need to print them off and sign them. But the first thing you need to do is pay the SEVIS fee, and you can't do that until you get your I-20 or your DS 2019. And the SEVIS fee is charged by the U.S. government. It's different from your visa application fee, and your SEVIS ID number is listed on your I-20. You'll need to use that ID number to pay the fee. And so make sure you write your name exactly as it appears on your I-20. So when you complete the DS 160 form, you need to actually write your name exactly as it appears on your I-20. If the name on your I-20 doesn't match your passport, make sure that you contact us, contact International Admissions, and we will correct that before you pay the SEVIS fee and apply for your visa. Then you need to print out the receipt of your SEVIS fee receipt and keep that for your records. As I mentioned, you need to complete the DS 160 form. This is the online visa application available on the U.S. Embassy or Consulate website. You should also pay the visa application fee if required in advance of your visa appointment. Sometimes you wait and you pay that the day of your visa appointment. It just depends on the consulate. You will need to upload an approved photo as part of your application. And then print out and keep the DS 160 confirmation page that shows that you've completed that. And then finally, make a visa appointment at your local embassy or consulate. And this is actually, we get questions from students all the time. Greg, what happens if I can't get an appointment? They're already filled. What should I do? That kind of thing. And so visa appointments are in high demand. And so what we suggest that you do is as you go to make your visa appointment at your local U.S. Embassy or consulate office, basically, if they're filled, you just need to keep checking every day because there's cancellations every day and slots opening and being taken. And so you really kind of need to keep track of that. Hopefully you've been admitted soon enough. You've received your I-20. As soon as you receive your I-20, you want to pay the SEVIS fee, complete the DS 160 form, and then make your visa appointment as soon as you possibly can. Okay. So that's the start of the process. So what to expect during the visa interview? So the first thing we'll tell you is applicants tend to be probably very nervous about this part of the application process. However, what we're going to tell you is that if you remain calm, answer questions honestly, and bring all required documents, the process can be very straightforward. Interviews are conducted in English, so do not bring another person to speak on your behalf or request that the interview be conducted in any language other than English. I will say if you are a student that is coming into an intensive English language program, that's going to state that on the I-20. And so the consulate's going to take that into account. And so they will actually flip into your native language. If your goal is to come and study English first, they get that, and they're going to actually conduct the interview in your native language if you're not proficient in English. But your I-20 is going to read that. It's going to say that you're going into an English language program, so they're going to understand that. If you are not going into an English language program, the interview must be conducted in English, and they are going to speak in English at all times and request that you do so too. The visa interviews do not last very long. The digital fingerprint scans are usually taken during the visa interview process, so that's normal, just so you know. And then the visa interview record is for life or until you become a U.S. citizen. One thing we will mention is if you're ever asked, have you ever been denied a visa before? Answer truthfully, because the consulate officer already knows. So sometimes they ask you these questions just to kind of test how truthful you are in your responses or genuine you are in your responses. And so just try to be truthful at all times, not suggesting that you wouldn't be, but if there's a temptation not to answer truthfully, don't do it, because that's an automatic denial for grounds for visa denial. So just make sure that that's the case. So the U.S. consulate officer makes the ultimate decision as to whether you will be granted a student visa, and he or she will exercise a lot of discretion in the process. We'll talk a little bit down the road in terms of some policies that they give them that ultimate decision. See, there's a question in the chat. Does the STEVIS fee have to pay through the mentioned website or along through the application for the visa? That's a great question. You actually have to pay it through the I-901 fee website and print off a copy of that. So you do not pay that along with the visa application, the DS-160 form. So they are two separate processes. So great question. All right, documents to bring to the interview. So the I-20 form or DS-2019 if you're a J student. Remember to sign it. It is okay to bring additional documents. Just know that you'll not be asked for them unless it comes up in the interview. So the visa interview documents are different from country to country. So we'd ask that you check with the U.S. consulate officer to make sure what documents you'll need to take for the visa interview. So here are some of the documents listed. Again, the passport, the visa application, DS-160 confirmation page, and fee receipt if required to pay in advance, your Colorado State University admission letter, TOEFL or IELTS score reports, GRE if you're a graduate student and if you've done the GRE, educational documents, documents to show that you've been a great student. So past high school transcripts, past college transcripts, extremely important financial support documents, and then other documents to show strong ties to your home country, property in your name, parents' information, income tax documents, all of those things are fine. But again, like I mentioned before, just keep in mind that unless you're asked for it, and typically 9 times out of 10, or 99% of the time, you're probably not going to be asked for additional documents, but it's important to have them in case they do ask you. So we like to point out that while documents are important, the most important part of obtaining your visa interview with the visa consulate officer is actually the interview. Your documents can look great. However, if the visa officer has any concerns during the interview based on your verbal responses, this will outweigh any positives that are presented in your documents. So we like to tell prospective students, the interview is high stakes and it can really make or break your ability to receive a visa. So we're going to talk about some of that going forward and how you're presenting yourself. And actually, as I look at the next slide here, we'll jump right into that. So how you present yourself is crucial, okay? So we give you 4 quick tips here, or excuse me, 6. I'm not counting correctly. So the first is don't memorize your answers. It is extremely important that your interview doesn't seem like a speech that you memorized. If it is, and it sounds like it's a speech and you're not being genuine, more than likely they're probably going to deny you on it. So don't memorize your answers. Two, we're going to suggest try to be calm. Okay. And I know it's hard. Okay. You're going through this process that is going to determine the next 3, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of your life, depending on if you're a bachelor's degree student, a master's, a PhD student. And so I get it can be extremely anxiety ridden, but a lot of times consulate officers, if they perceive that the applicant is extremely nervous, it tends to make them wonder if you're being truthful. So before you approach, take a deep breath, be respectful, and be calm. So the third tip is just simply be respectful. Yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Respond in those ways. Be polite. If you're extremely rude or whatever, they have the ability to write notes in your application interview screen. And so if they perceive you to be disrespectful, that not only could be a grounds for denial, but it could impact you in future visa interviews because they may write those notes in the interview screen. So number four, again, answer truthfully. And as mentioned before, if you're caught in a lie, it's an immediate grounds for denial, and later attempts will be impacted negatively as well. So just answer truthfully. Sometimes they'll throw out a question that they already know just to see whether or not your verbal answer is consistent with what's written on paper. Finally, be confident. Or number five, be confident. Not overconfident, but confident. You've been admitted to a solid nationally ranked university at Colorado State University, and you were qualified for admission. So you should be confident in the grades that you received in the past and the serious nature that you can present as a student. And so we would encourage you not to be nervous, but be confident. And then be familiar with the university and Fort Collins community. Learn a little bit about CSU, read and learn about your courses and program. Maybe know the names of a few professors. Know a little bit about Fort Collins, what the weather's like, where Colorado is actually located in the United States. Just know a few things. And with that, we'll talk about some of the questions that they might ask you down the road here or in future slides. And so we'll talk a little bit about what that means in terms of being familiar with Colorado State and Fort Collins, that kind of thing. All right. All right. So I attended actually, we have the opportunity to attend professional conferences in our field. And every now and then I attend consulate officers sessions on the visa interview process because they provide some insights to us that we can disseminate or pass on to you. And so the next few things here are insights from a former U.S. consulate officer that I gleaned from a couple of presentations over the years. So the first thing is there can be at times cultural misunderstandings. And what we mean by that is sometimes a visa officer is new in their position and they don't always understand the culture of the students applying or the individuals applying for specific visas. And I'll give you an example. This consulate officer gave this example. So basically they were new in their position. They were working at the Chinese or the U.S. Embassy in China, and Chinese couples kept bringing their grandparents and requesting visas for their grandparents to accompany them on their honeymoon. And this consulate officer was like, "This is strange. No one brings their grandparents on their honeymoon." And so she kept denying them. And so to the point where it happened a couple times over and over again. And so with her other consulate officer, she's like, "It's so strange. These young Chinese couples keep wanting to or keep asking for visitor visas to the US for their grandparents. And their grandparents are coming and in attending the interview session. And the other consulate officers were like, oh, well, so that's actually a custom, kind of a custom in China, where basically they want to thank their grandparents for taking care of them, because in the Chinese culture, grandparents tend to actually raise their grandkids as their sons or daughters are out in the workforce, that kind of thing. They take care of the kids, and so this is very common. And so she was like, oh, that makes sense. So then she started granting B1, B2 visitor visas to grandparents so that they could actually come on the honeymoon with their grandkids. And so there's sometimes cultural misunderstandings that occur. Also, sometimes there's limited language abilities for the ambassador. Consulate officers, whoops, let's see here. I accidentally hit the wrong slide here. Sorry, consulate officers go through intensive language training, but that might not be enough for them to fully understand all aspects of the local language. And so that is actually why all interviews are processed in English, unless, of course, it's ESL students. And then the final thing is this keeps happening, I apologize. The consulate officers are many times overworked with limited information. And so by that, most interviews last no longer than 3 minutes, and consulate officers need to interview 20 applicants per hour. And so, again, they're trying to get through a workload because there's just so many different applicants. So that's what, when we tell you before in a previous slide that the interviews tend to be extremely short, at maximum, they're going to be 3 minutes. So that's not a lot of time to make a determination. And so as we go over some of the future questions that they may offer, just know they're not going to ask you all of these. They may ask you one of these off of the list, but maybe not even that. It's just going to be a quick interview process. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide. So again, all decisions are final. So consulate officers, they do make the final decision like we mentioned. And when it's made, it cannot be even cannot be overturned even by the officer's supervisor. And this actually is known as the doctrine of consular non-reviewability. So that means that their decision is final. So if denied, students can apply again. However, the chances of another denial become incrementally higher. And one thing that we want to mention here, refusals are difficult to overcome. So a fresh look is true in theory, but case notes of previous refusals will be reviewed during or prior to the interview. And consulate officers can look back at the notes from previous visa appointments. Also, one thing that we want to point out, visa rejection rates are between 35 and 60% for student applications. That's a pretty wide gap and a high up to 60% denial rate. So just know that it can be difficult to overcome those refusals. So if you are denied, try to get the reason you were denied in writing. Typically, they'll just hand you a sheet that says 214B, and we'll talk about what that means. But I mean, at least you can ask them. And you know, if they say, well, no, I don't have time for that, here's 214B, here's a printed reason for denial. Don't engage the consulate officer in an argument. That's not going to help your case, but never hurts to ask them the question. Is there a reason why I was denied? Can you provide me with a little bit more insight? Sometimes they may say, yeah, actually, we're questioning about your ability to pay through your finances, so we need more or a stronger financial perspective from you. And so apply again and bring stronger financial information back. Or they might say something like that, or they may just say, nope, you have the ability to apply again. Feel free to apply again if you'd like. And so just do not get into an argument with the consulate officer. All right, so I mentioned INA 214B, and this is a statute that covers everything. And it's extremely broad statute, so a consular officer can refuse for anything. And so I'll give you an example. One of my former bosses used to be the consulate officer in the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City. And she said at times they decided to deny students based on the color of their socks. And you think, well, that's weird. Um, and so she said, well, there was a reason for this, and that is students would come dressed up in suits. And if they came dressed up in suits and they were wearing white socks, there was a suit rental company that was just around the street from the embassy. So that typically implied that if you had white socks with a black suit, that typically indicated that that suit was not yours and you didn't have the financial ability to cover the expenses while you were in the US. But if you had black socks, typically that meant that that was your suit. And so as a result, they took that as an indication of whether or not you could actually afford to go to school in the US. And so it's kind of one of those deals where kind of an unorthodox way to determine who was eligible for a visa is the color of their socks. But she said that was one of the things that they did. This was maybe good 25, 30 years ago. So just an example of them being able to deny a visa based on anything they perceive. And so this is why it's important to be honest and genuine in who you are. As we mentioned before, they have notes from previous interviews. So if anything does not match, they will automatically deny you the visa. And the consulate officers are considered human lie detectors by our State Department. So if they feel something's off, they can use 214B and not give any reason for denial. And so just keep in mind that that's what you're up against as you're going through this interview. Nothing to panic but it's good to have this sort of insight in terms of presenting yourself in a genuine way. And Atika, I will address that question towards the end of the presentation here. So what is administrative processing? So sometimes you get through an interview process and they hand you a form that says 221G. And what that means is it's you haven't been denied, but your application is under administrative processing. And really what that means is they just need to do some more research to take more time to review your circumstances. Or something needs to be corrected, maybe there's a wrong birth date on your I-20 that you didn't catch, things like that. And so there tends to be sometimes this process 221G, which is administrative processing. So it could be a number of things, including maybe a background check because a flag was raised during an interview. Sometimes your name matches exactly to some criminal that's on the Interpol criminal list, and so they have to, stop and actually review to make sure that you're not that person. So sometimes it's a background check. Sometimes, again, documentary things need to be resolved. For example, a program start date on an I-20. Let's say you're getting close. Your visa interview is the day before the first day of the semester, and they're like, well, there's no way you're going to arrive by the first day of the semester, so we need you to contact the school and get an updated I-20 with a new program start date on it, so that we know that when we issue this visa, it's still okay for you to attend that university and arrive late. Sometimes the program of study could need review, especially for those programs that are on the list for national safety. Sometimes, and this was at a past institution that I worked at, we had a flight school. So oftentimes when international students were coming for training to be a pilot, they actually had to go through an extra step of review. So just be aware that it could happen from time to time where there's administrative processing. Now, if that does happen, tough part about that is we don't know how long it's going to take. And so it could take 2 weeks, it could take 4 months. And so it's hard to say how long that's going to take, but they will notify you as soon as they have made a determination on your record. All right, so there's some next 3 slides are actually some final consular officer thoughts. So if the visa application process is taking a very long time and you think you'll be late for the start of the semester, especially in the case where it's administrative processing, you need to contact the International Student Services Office as early as possible and we'll assist you through the next steps. A lot of times students are asking us the question, can I arrive, a month late, a month and a half late? And the answer is simply no. If it's a month and a half late, typically we need to defer your attendance to the next semester, especially for undergrad students. For grad students, it may be a situation where your graduate department says it's okay. You're actually taking classes online or independently while you're in your home country until you can arrive. And so they've made some arrangements. So there are times where if a graduate department is requesting you to arrive late, we can maybe work with that a little bit. But at the undergraduate level, literally you have to be here by the end of the first week of classes. So if you're gonna not make it by that date, then a lot of times we'll work with you to send you an updated I-20 for the next semester. So once you receive your visa, a couple things that go without saying, and you enter the United States, don't get into trouble. Okay, once arrested, fingerprints go into the FBI system and will eventually make their way to the State Department. It will likely have negative impact on future visa interviews, especially if the arrest is within the last 5 years. It will also negatively impact visa renewal and very well may, I'm going to spelling error I need to correct, very well may result in a visa revocation or even a CVIS record termination. So you don't want to get into trouble while you're here in the United States. When you come for orientation, we'll actually have a session by our CSU campus police department that will talk about kind of the laws that you need to follow, that kind of thing. And so we'll help provide you with solid information and educational information on how to maintain your legal status. But again, avoid getting into trouble, goes without saying. So a couple of final thoughts on social media screening. So of course, we've all heard that the Department of State has begun to screen social media accounts. You need to ensure that there's nothing on these accounts that could be considered anti-American. Just the state of the world we're living in right now and the state of our country. And so it's extremely important that you have nothing on your accounts that could be perceived like that. Immigration agencies request information regarding personal social media accounts. This includes all accounts used within the last 5 years. And we give you a list here. There's a whole bunch of them as examples of social media accounts that they're checking. And so if you have any of these accounts within the last 5 years, you want to make sure that you list them all. I believe that the DS-160 form has been altered so that you can enter your social media accounts on there. Be conscious and thoughtful of information that you post on social media, particularly regarding your political views. And then immigration officials are likely able to view your full private profile and contact regardless of the access to a password. And so just keep that in mind. You need to make sure that all of your profiles and all of these social media accounts are set to public so that consulate officers can review those. If they're private and they require approval, it can be a situation where they think that you're trying to hide something, and so it could negatively impact your visa interview. And then final thought on the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP. That's when you enter the United States. You'll kind of engage our U.S. Customs and Border Protection. They may choose to conduct an electronic device search of any travelers entering or exiting the country. So searches can include basic searches, manual reviews of devices without use of external technology, or advanced searches, technical reviews of devices by connection to technologies used to review and save contents. So devices include laptops, tablets, smartphones, USB drives, external hard drives, or other data storage devices. You are not required to provide passwords, though this may result in confiscation of the device or denial of an entry to the United States if you don't provide them with the passwords for these devices. And so just keep that in mind. We're in a day of scrutiny, so to speak, and so this could possibly be something that happens. Now, I will say this, and maybe we suggest this, I can't remember, but I'll just put this. I don't believe it's included in my presentation, but basically, make sure that as you schedule your flights when you enter the United States, it's going to take you a little bit of time to go through customs. So make sure there's maybe a 2 to 3 hour gap between your entry flight and your connecting flight. So if you are referred to secondary, you still have the ability to secondary inspection where they have more questions or they want to review your one of your devices, that kind of thing, that you still have time to make your connecting flight. So always plan ahead when it comes to scheduling your flight coming into the United States. 3-4 hours is not a bad thing, because if it takes you a couple hours to get through the immigration and answer any CBP officers' questions, you'll still have time to make your connecting flight. So we would suggest that. All right, sometimes we get questions for visas for family members. So family members can come with you to the US while you study at Colorado State University. These family members are called your dependents and can apply for an F2 visa. For an F2 visa, these purposes, dependents are your legal spouse or unmarried children under the age of 21. So if you are in a situation where you want to bring your spouse or your children, please contact our International Admissions Office for the appropriate I-20 paperwork for you and your dependents, so they can apply for an F2 visa. Now, this doesn't have to happen before you arrive. Let's say you want to travel by yourself, get here, get settled, get an apartment, and then bring your spouse and your children with you. At that point in time, just contact our office, provide us with some financial documentation that shows that you can cover their expenses while you're here in the US. And then what we will do is issue you those F2 I-20s, and you can actually send them back to your family and they can apply for a dependent F2 visa after you arrive. And that's very common as well. Sometimes we get the request that if other family members are actually coming with you to CSU, sometimes we get the request that students want their parents to come with them when they first get here to the United States and arrive on campus. That's completely fine. They will actually need to apply for a tourist visa. And so B1, B2 visitor visa is what they would apply for, so that they can actually accompany you. The reason why they're actually traveling is to actually travel with their son or daughter to come for a couple of weeks while they join the university, and that is completely fine. There's no issues with it. So very common. Every year we have maybe 4 or 5 sets of parents that have traveled with their son or daughter because they want to see Colorado State University and maybe meet some smiling faces of the people that are going to help their sons or daughters while they're actually here attending CSU. So that's great. So we'll talk about some sample interview questions, and I'm probably not going to go over all of these, but these questions are actually, this presentation will be listed on our website resource page, so you'll be able to see these questions again and kind of look through those. It's important that you be familiar with these and that you have an answer for these questions. But again, I'll reiterate, it is important that you do not memorize your answers. You need to have a conversation, a genuine conversation with the consulate officer. And the more genuine your responses can be, the more well received they're going to be by the consulate officer. So I'm just talking to you now, kind of presenting. I don't have this presentation memorized, but I'm just speaking to you from a genuine, this is how you approach the visa process. And that's how you should engage the visa consulate officer. So they may have, and again, keep in mind that these interviews are very short, so they're not going to ask you all of these questions. I have 2 slides of questions here, but they may ask any one of these questions, and you need to be familiar with or have at least a general response to each of these questions. So the first one, why did you select to study in the United States? What institutions did you apply to? Why did you select this institution? Why did you decide to study at Colorado State University? It's funny, over the years, I have students that have said, so Greg, I might be answered or asked this question, why did I choose to study at Colorado State University? How should I answer that? And my response is simply to them, okay, let me ask you a question. Why did you decide to study at Colorado State University? I said, I can't give you a just pat answer to this. Only you know why you decided to study at Colorado State. Maybe it's you had a friend from high school that referred you to Colorado State, and we had a really solid degree in engineering, in mechanical engineering, and you decided, hey, this is a good fit. I've got a friend there. It's got my major, that kind of thing. Great, tell them that. Okay. Maybe you decided to study at Colorado State University because you applied to, 6 or 7 different schools in the US. And after attending these pre-arrival workshops and being able to ask questions of our admissions team and our International Student and Scholar Services team, we were the most friendly. And so you were like, you know what? I really feel like this is the place I need to study. Tell them. Okay. There's no wrong answer here. It's just be genuine and kind of give them reasons for why you decided to study at Colorado State University. Is this your first time going to the US? Again, answer truthfully. If it is, tell them, yeah, this will be my first time going to the US. If you've been here under another visa, maybe a B1, B2 visitor visa, that kind of thing, tell them, yes, I've been to the United States before. No, this is not my first time going there. They already know it. They can see it in the system. So this is one of those questions that they're just trying to see how genuine your response is and whether you're being truthful. Tell me more about the institution you selected. And so this one's key. Okay, so they're not asking you to spit out a memorized speech on, well, Colorado State was established in 1882. I don't know if that's when we were established, but 1882, and it has approximately 33,000 students, of which 28,000 are residential students. Oh, their eyes are going to glaze over and they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear a memorized speech about what Colorado State University is like. Do some research on your program. Okay, maybe you are going mechanical engineering, and one of the cool things that they're working on is a solar powered car. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if they are, but maybe that's the case. And you have this interest in solar power as it pertains to mechanical engineering. And so that's one of the things that drew you to this institution. So maybe you say, um, Colorado State University, what I found out is as I've engaged the International Student and Scholar Services, there's a lot of friendly people there. But as I've asked them questions, I found out that there's a lot of people from my home country. And so I find that to be, something I'm excited about because I can immediately go there and have some community of fellow countrymen and women that are at Colorado State University. Maybe it's, I had a chance to see the pictures and it's really beautiful. It's actually close to the Rocky Mountain National Park. And I'm from Nepal. And so as a result, I'm used to the Himalayas. And so being that close to the Rocky Mountains, I'm excited about kind of at least being able to be around a familiar kind of geological environment, that kind of thing. So talk to them a little bit about what you know without just memorizing and repeating facts about the institution. Have a genuine conversation with them. Okay. Did you do the TOEFL, the GRE, the IELTS? What were your scores? They probably already have that information, but maybe they're asking because it wasn't submitted. What are your summer vacation plans? Will you return home for the summer? Students always ask me, Greg, what should I say? If I say I'm staying, is that a bad thing? If I say that I'm going home, is that a bad thing? Well, again, what are your plans? So after the end of each year, fall and spring, you have the ability to have a vacation term. If your plans are to remain in the United States and work an on-campus job, tell them that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's an opportunity for you to be employed on campus. And so there's no issues with that. If you say, well, I'm going to be actually traveling home every summer, and they look at your financial circumstances and situation and see that you can just barely afford to attend the university, they're going to have one eyebrow raised because they're going to say, well, I don't know if that's accurate. I don't know if they're being truthful with me, because they can barely attend afford the cost of education at Colorado State. How are they going to afford a plane ticket every summer? But you may be a student that your parents show 10 times the amount of what it costs to go to Colorado State University on the financial documents. And so you say, well, yeah, my parents want me to come home every summer. And so I plan to return home, visit my parents. And they look at your finances and go, yeah, this student can afford that. No problems. That makes sense. So again, what is your circumstances? What is your situation? And just speak truthfully about that. Who's paying for your education? What does your sponsor do for a living? Where does your sponsor work? Currently, what do you do? These are all questions that they may ask. Very easy for you to have a response to those questions. Moving on to the second slide here. If you're currently working, why are you leaving the current job? If you're helping your father's business or family business, what will your father or family do for the 4 years while you're gone? Um, who do you have in the US? Do you have any friends and family? If you have family, they probably already know that, so mention that. People say, do I mention that I have friends at the university that I'm going to? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes people think that, or students, prospective students have heard from other people, oh, don't tell them that you know people in the US because that could be bad. Actually, it can be perceived as extremely good because if you have a family member that's at Colorado State, or in the area in Colorado, that's a support network for you when you get to the United States. And so, if you have friends, tell them, yeah, I've got a couple of friends that are in Boston, or I have a couple of friends that are in California or Colorado. I have a family member that goes to another school across the U.S., but during the breaks, I'll travel to visit them. But otherwise, yeah, just be truthful, be honest. How many brothers and sisters do you have? What is your field of study? Why did you select this field of study? Why do you think you need to go to the US to do this field? There are many courses and programs in your country. Why do you need to go to the US? What are you planning to do after graduation? And this question here, students ask me, well, Greg, how should I respond to that? Well, what's your plan? You do have the ability to work a minimum of 1 year of optional practical training. So you might want to say, well, I'm hoping that I can get a job uh, in the US for a year through optional practical training to get some experience. If you're a STEM major, science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, might extend that for a couple of years after the fact, just so I can get some experience before I return home. You could say, well, I'm planning on returning home. My mom and dad need me to come back and help run the family business. And so going there for a business degree. And now when I graduate, I'm planning on immediately returning. That's great. That's a solid answer too. So it's not a trick question. What are your plans after you graduate? You might say, well, I'm planning on going to go on after I get my bachelor's degree to get a master's degree. So I might work for a year in between the bachelor's and master's degree and then continue pursuing a higher level degree. So all of these are good responses. Um, are you planning to work during your 4 year period? This one um, is another good question that students ask. Well, what should I say? There's nothing wrong with working on campus. Your visa category allows you to work up to 20 hours per week in on campus, and so you can say, well, my main reason for coming to the United States is to attend classes and go to school, but you know, the F1 visa allows me to work 20 hours per week on campus, so I might try to find a job on campus so I can get a pizza with my friends from time to time, or pay to wash my laundry, that kind of thing. So that might be an option, but my plan is to attend school and focus on that. Some parents don't want their kids working, they're covering their expenses. So you could say, no, I'm not planning on working. My parents don't want me to because they want me to focus on my studies. And that's a great answer as well. So, again, what is your circumstances? What are your situation? These are not trick questions. Now, if you say, yeah, I'm planning to work 40 hours per week so I can cover my expenses, yeah, that's going to raise an eyebrow. You should not have that as a response because knowing the F1 visa regulations only allow you to work 20 hours per week while school is in session. 8 months out of the year, you can only work 20 hours per week. You are not going to be able to afford your education by working 20 hours per week on campus. It's just not a fact. And so keep that in mind as well. And then what will you do if your visa is rejected? And I think this one's a good one to have a solid response to as well, from a standpoint of, well, have you applied to, what's your plan B? Have you applied to other countries? Have you been admitted to a university in your home country? That kind of thing. Maybe your response is, well, if I get my visas rejected, I'll try applying again because I really want to study in the US. Or you might say, well, I've been admitted to a university in Australia and a university in the United Kingdom. And so if I don't get admitted to the US, I will look to join those universities in those other countries. So there's a lot of different options. Again, make sure that you have a plan B and you're able to talk about what that might look like if your visa is rejected. So those are some of the sample questions. So one thing we want to remind you is once you receive your visa, you're not quite done. So even though students have successfully received their visa, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, they process all individuals pursuant to immigration laws and reviews of available evidence at the time of application for admission to make a determination of admissibility at the port of entry. And so keep that in mind that they can still refuse entry at the border if they have reason to question the legitimacy of a student's travel documents, or if the traveler cannot adequately answer questions about the purpose of travel. At a past institution, so I'll relay a case or an example. We had a graduate student coming into the university I used to work at. And so as he was coming through the border, Customs and Border Patrol, he presented his I-20 and his F1 visa, and they asked him what's his purpose for coming, and he said, well, I'm coming to be a football coach. And so they're like, what? Your documents that you're presenting us are actually indicating that you're coming to be a student. So they denied him entry. They refused him entry because he said he was coming to be a football coach. And the truth of it was, his reason for coming was to enter a graduate master's program in business administration, but he had received an assistantship to be an assistant football coach with our football team. And that's how he was going to cover his expenses and his classes. But he made the mistake of putting that above the importance of, in his response, saying that was his reason for coming instead of saying that his reason was to come to study a master's degree in business administration. And so at that point, he got refused. He had to return home. It was an expensive flight back again. And then basically he attempted again and he was able to come, but it caused him additional expenses, that kind of thing. So at the port of entry, you're not quite done. CBP has stated in all cases, the burden of proof rests with the applicant to demonstrate his or her admissibility. So you need to make sure you're prepared to answer questions upon entry and that these answers are consistent to being a student in the United States. You should also carry financial proof that you can afford to attend school in the US. And students must be clear and be able to speak about the purpose of their trip, as well as provide requested evidence of financial support if asked. And then This is a stat from a few years back, but during that year, there were at least 21 students from India that were denied entry to the US based on the responses that they gave. And so we give this link here. I believe it's still live in terms of that article. And so just keep in mind that it's still important to be able to ask questions or answer questions. Also, like I mentioned before, if you have any devices, they may screen those upon entry now. And so keep that in mind as well. So not quite done. So, all right. And with that, we come to the end of the presentation. And so whenever we create a presentation, we like to give credit where credit is due. And so these links here are where you can actually obtain some of the information that I presented in regards to visa interviews, visa processes, possible questions, that kind of thing. So again, these links are available to you as well. And we would then open it up for questions. And I'll start with some of the questions that we have in the chat. Once we get through those, then if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question, feel free to do that. But let's start with these first three questions that I haven't answered. So Tika, she sends a question. I'm an admitted student for spring 2026 semester, currently waiting for my government scholarship confirmation, which will be issued in late November. Would it be possible to request my I-20 shortly after receiving the scholarship confirmation letter so it aligns with my visa application timeline? So the short answer is, Atika, yes. So right now, if you've been admitted, and I assume that you've provided financial documents based on personal funding, but if you get a government scholarship and you want us to add that to your financial lines on your I-20, as soon as you get that in late November, feel free to provide us with that documentation, and then we can actually enter that in on your I-20, and then you can schedule a visa at that time. Now, November's pretty late in terms of visa interviews, and so if you already have financial funding and you don't want to rely on the government scholarship confirmation for you to apply for a visa, and you have personal funding that shows that you can cover your expenses, I would suggest getting the I-20 right away, scheduling your visa appointment, and going through that interview process. Now, that being said, you don't want to mention that you're getting a government scholarship during the interview process, because if you do that, then they'll look at the I-20 and say, well, how come that's not listed on the financial side of the I-20? What you're saying isn't really matching up with the paperwork that we provided. So if you've got personal family funding and you can afford that, and you want to kind of ensure that you can get a timely visa interview appointment, that kind of thing, then I would suggest that you go ahead with that and then not mention government scholarship confirmation. And at that point in time, if you get the scholarship from your government, then we can always update that at a later date. After you've gotten the visa, we can always update that on your I-20. So long answer to your question, but you may want to consider the scarcity of visa appointments at the end of November. And so if you have the ability to show financial documentation and you get your I-20 sooner, it might be in your best interest to sign up for a visa interview prior to the end of late November. So that would be my answer there. Let's see here. So in my application, should I apply to my family at the very same application? Worth to mention that I have DS 2019 too. So let's see here. Ahmed, it's a good question. You can do that. There's no problems with that. And so if you're going to apply for visas for your family members during the same application, then you need to contact our admissions office so that we can create DS 2019s for your family members. They're dependent DS 2019s that allow them to apply for a J2 visa. And so if you want to do it all at the same time, then we need to contact the admissions office and have them create DS 2019s for your family members. We may need to see additional financial documentation that shows that you can cover those expenses. Okay. And another question that you have, how, if my spouse has an average English language, may not communicate well with, in the interview? That's a great question. If your spouse is not proficient in English, that is not a huge issue. If they attend your visa interview, that kind of thing, um, A2 dependents, F2 dependents, they're not required to be proficient in English. It's only the F1 and J1 because you, in order to be admitted to a school in the United States, you have to show that you have the English language proficiency, unless, of course, you're going into an English language program. Okay, so if your spouse does not have English language proficiency, they will simply conduct the interview in your native language, and that is completely fine for F2 and J2 visa interviewers. So again, it's not required that you're proficient in English if you're applying for a dependent visa. All right, we got another question here. My admission letter mentions that the department is considering me for financial assistance, but not confirmed. I received no update. If possible, could you please let me know when I might expect a final decision or official confirmation regarding the GTA position? Having an idea of the timeline would help me plan my steps for I-20 and complete my immigration documentation visa process on time. It's a great question, Aman. So you will want to reach out to your department, your graduate school department, and ask those questions. Each department has different timelines for when they make decisions on graduate teaching assistant positions. And so you would want to reach out directly to them. Our office for sure would have those timelines. You could also reach out to the International Enrollment Center and I'll enter this email in the chat, any admissions questions or financial questions like that. International at colostate.edu. Well, if you send an email to that email address and ask that same exact question, they may be able to give you at least some sort of idea on timelines and when you'll hear back. But our office wouldn't know that, but more than likely the best source is to go straight to the department, graduate school department that you applied to, and ask them when they're making decisions on their GTA positions. So hopefully that helps. All right, sounds great. I'm glad that we've already given you their DS 2019s, and I want to pronounce your name as Rukoya, and I'm not sure if that's correct, but hopefully I've got that correct. So that's great. Other questions? Does anyone else have any other questions on the visa interview presentation today? Any thoughts? Any concerns? And if you can either type them out in the webinar chat, or if you want to raise your hand, we can allow you to talk as well. I'm okay with a little bit of awkward silence as you come up with your questions. So Atika asks, thank you for your helpful answer. Great, happy to help. Also wanted to ask, since the F1 visa is strictly for academic purposes, if we're asked about future work plans or staying in the US, could that affect the approval? And would having a previous B1, B2 visa or past visits make any difference in the approval process? So 2 questions there. The first question would be, if you're asked about future work plans, I think no, it's a great question. Typically, your response wants to, if they ask you about your future plans after you graduate, or future, do you plan on working while you're in the United States during your 4-year degree or your 3-year degree, that kind of thing. So the short answer is no, it won't negatively impact the visa approval. I think it's how you present it on whether or not it may or may not impact the approval. And so let me give you some examples here. So they ask you, do you plan on working in the working while you're staying in the US, well, are you a graduate student that has a graduate teaching assistantship or a graduate research assistantship? If so, if you've been offered that, then the answer is yes, I plan on working while I'm in the US. I've been given a graduate research assistant position at Colorado State University, and I am going to need to work 20 hours per week in order to fulfill that commitment. And as a result, they will waive my tuition. That's a great answer. If you are saying, yeah, I plan on, I know that the F1 regulations or the J1 regulations allow me to work on campus 20 hours per week. So I'm going to try to get an on-campus job so I have a little bit of spending money or discretionary money. There's nothing wrong with that. If they're saying, well, what are your plans after you graduate? Saying that you're planning on taking advantage of optional practical training, which is a regulation underneath the F1 regulations, or if you're a J1 student, saying I'm planning on trying to obtain a job underneath academic training, which gives me permission to work for a year or two while I'm here in the United States. That's completely fine. It's completely within the regulations. But it might be beneficial to say, yeah, I plan on working after I graduate to try to get some experience. But after that, I'm intending or planning on returning home to make an impact in my home country. That's a great answer too. Okay. So if you're asked about your future work plans or staying in the United States, and one thing, so let me separate these two. Staying in the United States, it's a non-immigrant visa. So your plan should never, or you should never suggest that your plan is to remain in the United States. Okay, you shouldn't, because you're applying for a non-immigrant visa that gives you a temporary visa that allows you to stay in the United States for a certain purpose or reason. If you indicate that you're planning on immigrating to the US and you're applying for a non-immigrant visa, that is an immediate grounds for denial. So you do not want to suggest that that's the case. And once you get your F1 visa and you get here and you maybe you fall in love with a US citizen and your plans change. That's okay. Plans can change. But initially, as you're applying for a visa, you want to make sure that you are in all cases, making sure that they understand that is your intent to return home after your program ends. And so that's what I would suggest there. Then your final question, would having a previous US B1, B2 visa or past visits make any difference? It won't have any impact or any difference. The only thing the reason why it would have a negative impact is if you actually overstayed your visa, where you came under B1, B2 and you stayed past 6 months, then they might consider you an immigration risk. And so if you've ever overstayed a visa or had a negative encounter with the law or something like that, that could definitely impact you. But if it was just a general visa, you came for a month or 2 months and then you returned home, nope, there should be no impact on that whatsoever. So hopefully that helps there. You are welcome. And Aman says, what would be the ideal time we should have dealt with visa interview? And I feel like we are in a timeline, like is November and December initial week is at the time I must have completed. So your question, I'm gathering your question is this: when's the best time to schedule my visa interview? And what I would suggest is as soon as possible. So as soon as you get your I-20 and you have the ability to schedule your visa interview, the longer you wait, and end of November or December, can you still get a visa interview? It's going to be tough. Okay. So as soon as you get your I-20, now, how do I want to say this? You may get your visa or your I-20 or your DS-2019 right now, and you go out there and the only option for a visa interview is November, the end of November. Great, snag it, schedule that interview. Or the beginning of December, schedule that interview. That's great. As long as you have a scheduled interview, you're fine. But if you're waiting to schedule your interview till end of November or December, you're going to have a difficult time trying to get a visa interview at that point. So hopefully that helps enough. For spring, 26 students that are having a challenge getting a date for visa interview. There are any circumstances under which an emergency date request would not be granted? Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, you can reach out to individual consulate offices. Sometimes you can request an expedited visa interview, but typically just because the fact that there's no visa interview dates available doesn't necessarily they're not going to perceive that as a valid reason for an expedited interview. So again, for students that are struggling to find an interview date, we encourage you to go out to that website first thing every morning and continue to check to see if an interview date is opened up because someone has actually canceled their interview. Plans change, people change their minds, so on and so forth. And so just got to keep checking back as much as you possibly can. Hopefully you can schedule that in visa interview. So that's about the best advice I can give you there, Gidville. How do we deal with a consulate officer who interviews under pressure? Moses, I'm not sure what you mean by that, or that's maybe try to explain what you mean a little bit more. Who interviews under pressure? I'm not sure. Try to clarify for me if you could, Moses. What should I do if I'm unable to get my visa before the start of the semester? So again, keep trying to find a visa interview date. But if you can't get your visa before the start of the semester, if you're an undergraduate student, we're telling students that they would as long as you can arrive by the end of the first week of classes, that you can still come. If you cannot arrive by the end of the first week of classes, then you need to contact us and we need to defer your admission to the fall semester. Okay. If you're a graduate student, you need to talk with your grad program and see if it's okay to arrive late. And in some cases, they say, yeah, there's no problems with that. And as long as they request us to allow you for a late arrival, typically right now we've given between 2 and 3 weeks, up to 2 to 3 weeks for a late arrival, Dennis. So if you're a master's or PhD student and you wanted to start late and your department approves that, and we receive the request from the department saying it's okay for this particular student to arrive late, then we would actually send you a I-20 with a deferred start date on there. So those would be the two options. Undergrad students, not a lot of options. Graduate students, contact your graduate school, graduate program, and then kind of have them reach out to us. And as long as the request is coming from them, then we will be able to kind of work with you on that arrival date. Okay. Would you please write down the website for paying the SEVIS fee? Oh, that's a great question. Let me see if I can find it. Hold on. SEVIS. Let me do a quick Google search. One. Here is. So here it is. Oops, no, that didn't work. Hold on. Sorry. Okay. Copy. All right, this link here is to the question, would you please write down the website for paying the SEVIS fee? This is the official federal government fmjfee.com website, and this is where you should go to pay the SEVIS fee once you have your I-20. So, and Moses says, by pressure, I mean not giving enough time to explain and interrupting when you speak. Oh, it's a great question. You have to be as polite as possible. So let me explain a couple things here. The visa interview is a very subjective process, not an objective process. By that I mean our consulates that are around the U.S., our visa around the world, our visa officers that are around the world, they too can have a bad day. Okay. And unfortunately, let's say this visa consulate officer is driving into work or riding on the bus, and the bus hits a bump and they spill their coffee all over their tie. Okay. I hate to tell you, unfortunately, if that visa consulate officer is having a bad day, you are probably not getting a visa that day because they're in a bad mood because they spilled coffee all over their tie or their dress or whatever the case is. So what I would suggest, Moses, is this. First of all, just do the best you can. Be as genuine and as pleasant as you possibly can. If they start to interrupt you or speak over you, don't get irritated or annoyed by that. They are in charge of this interview, and so um, uh, let them speak, and then just try to resume your response. So it's in all cases, try to remain genuine, pleasant, even if you get a consulate officer that seems a bit frustrated, mean-spirited, mean even. I'd love to tell you that all our consulate officers are just super friendly, nice people. Many of them are, some of them are not. And so just to do your best in that situation. Try to be respectful at all times, though. That will go miles and miles or kilometers and kilometers to really helping you towards a successful visa interview process. Okay. So that's probably the best guidance I can give you. So it's a great question. I hope that you get a really nice person that is friendly and genuine. And that's what we hope for all of our students, but it doesn't always happen. So Rem says, what if I'm funded by an international financing company like Empower and I don't have other funds to show? Does it affect my approval for a visa? No. If you have a company and you're coming in with a educational financial letter, support letter from an international company saying they're going to support you for your 3-year master's degree or 4-year bachelor's degree, or for as long as it takes you to attend or complete a PhD program. And on that letter, it says that they will provide a minimum of X number of dollars, whatever the cost of tuition is on your I-20 over the next 4 years or 3 years or for the duration of your program. If you have a letter that says that, that's completely fine. You don't have to have personal or family funds to show. So if you've got a company, but it is important you have an official letter from them that basically indicates their willingness to support you. That's definitely important. So hopefully that helps, Rems. All right. Any other questions? We're nearing, got about 7 minutes left in the presentation, and I want to make sure that folks have the ability to ask any other questions. We'll move to the next slide, and basically this is not an appropriate email. So there's a couple things I have to correct. So let's see here. This, hang tight here. I just want to make sure I have the appropriate email address for our office. ISSS mail is not accurate. So let me find this. Hold on. What actually is accurate? ISSS mail at colostate.edu. So think that's what I had, but let me double check. No, I did not. So this is the appropriate email address if you need to contact the ISSS office. So I will need to correct that on my presentation here. Shazad asks, how much finance do I need to show for education on bank statement? Is it full 4 years or of undergraduate or covering the first year or 2 years? That's a great question. On your bank statement, you need to show a minimum of 1 academic year. Okay. So if you can show the entire 4 years or a couple of years, that's great. It just confirms to the consulate officer that your family has sufficient funds to cover your expenses. But if you just show 1 academic year, that's the only requirement that the law requires in order to issue a visa. So 1 academic school year is sufficient. Typically, if you have an affidavit of support from your family that basically indicates that they're covering all 4 years, that's fine. That accompanies the bank statement. But from a bank statement standpoint, from a bank statement standpoint, only 1 academic year. For sponsored students, no. Actually, it's a great question. So for Jays, it's different. Jays, your sponsor has to be willing to show that they, or the letter coming from your sponsor actually needs to indicate that they're covering the entire length of your program. And if you are a J1 student, typically you're not showing a bank statement, but you're showing a sponsored letter, so to speak. So what I'm suggesting in terms of the bank statement is for F1 students only. Requia, for sponsored students, your sponsor just needs to be able to suggest that they're going to cover the entire length of your program. Typically, the government sponsor has connections with the U.S. Embassy, so they don't require a bank statement. But you'll probably need to provide a letter from your sponsor indicating that they're covering the expenses for the entire length of the program. So, all right. Any final questions? Well, seeing none, thank you all for attending today's workshop. 1 question. Okay, Aman, we'll let you ask this 1 question. In the meantime, those who are have attended, thank you for attending today. If you have questions, feel free to email us at iss@mail.colostate.edu with any immigration questions, that kind of thing. If you have admissions questions, feel free to email international@colostate.edu, and our international admissions office will answer any of your admissions questions. Your final question, Aman, how much time it takes CSU to issue an I-20? Typically, I believe they will issue an I-20 within 5 working days from the time that your application is complete. And so if you completed your application and you have not received an I-20 within a week, 5 business days, I would reach out to them and ask them what's happening. And you would actually reach out to international@colostate.edu. That would be the email. So, all right, folks, have a wonderful evening, wonderful afternoon, wonderful morning, depending on where you're at. Have a great day. Thanks for attending, and I look forward to chatting with you all at a future pre-arrival workshop. So have a wonderful evening.